The Columbia Basin Project is a series of dams, hydroelectric pumps, rivers, and streams that provide hydroelectricity and water for the people living in the Washington area. The Columbia Basin Project has helped many people living in central Washington, a dry desert, gain access for water for drinking or farming. The Columbia Basin Project has done a lot for Washington State and will hopefully continue to grow in the future. Early in 1952, W. Gale Matthews, a resident of the Grant County since 1890, and at the time of this account, the president of the Grant County Title Abstract Company, gave idea of this project as his area is dry. Many people from Spokane opposed this idea of irrigating the land and requested a 134-mile or 216-kilometer gravity flow canal from Lake Penn or Rio. On the contrary, others from Wenatchee supported W. Gale by requesting a large dam on the Columbia River, or now known as the Grand Coulee Dam. After 13 long years of intense debate between these two opposing sides, President Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized the dam project with the National Industrial Recovery Act money. With the National Industrial Recovery Act money, the construction of the Grand Coulee Dam began in 1933 and was completed in 1942. Later, additional hydroelectric generating capacity and pumps were added in the 1970s to generate electricity and spread water out evenly to other areas, as well as take advantage of the stored water that came from the Columbia River. This was the time when the Columbia Basin Project came into place. The project was not cheap though. Even though we do not know the total cost of the entire project, as it is hard to determine, we do know that originally $63,377,000 was provided by the state of Washington and President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1933. The money provided by them was nothing, as the Grand Coulee Dam itself was $163 million or $2 billion in 2019 dollars. Because of this massive budget cut in 1935, Congress agreed to fund the additional $100 million required for the project, or $1.5 billion today. The Columbia Basin Project had just come into place, but with that so did World War II. Within a year, the main purpose of pumping water for irrigation was postponed for electrical power generation in favor of the United States war effort. After the war, an emphasis was put back on irrigation. Construction was resumed on the pumping plant in 1946. By 1951, the plant and its 65,000 horsepower pumps were ready for operation. The first water was delivered to the Banks Lake, equalizing the reservoir above the dam that same year. Washington's economy wouldn't be the same without the Columbia Basin Project. The project has led to many economic achievements and will continue to as Washington grows. Homeless and unemployed people destroy the economy because less people go into stores, which leads to less money, which means less businessmen, which means less residents are going to settle there. The Columbia Basin Project helped the homeless and unemployment rate of Washington go down tremendously by hiring 50,000 people to work on the Columbia Basin Project. The Columbia Basin Project has also had a major impact on Washington. The Columbia Basin Project also had a major effect on Washington trade. Many billboards across the country will advertise Washington's farms and opportunities after the project irrigated the state, and soon many people from across the nation moved into Washington. The majority of these people traveled using trains, so many railways and train stations were built in favor of the many people moving in. Due to all the train stations and railways being built, many goods were being imported and exported quickly. Many things were being imported or produced in Washington, and soon lots of wheat and rice products were being exported to Asian countries, hence the growing economy. The Columbia Basin Project has also helped so many farmers that the amount of money from exporting / selling produced products is $630 million a year. Moreover, the Columbia Basin Project had brought in $950 million from hydroelectric power production, $20 million in flood prevention, and almost $250 million from ship and cargo container manufacturing / distributing. The Columbia Basin Project has shaped the economy of Washington, and without it, Washington's economy wouldn't be the same. The environment is what we live and breathe, and if anything happened to it, we would immediately know. This is not the case with Washington's environment in the 1900s. After World War II, parts of the dam were blown up to generate more hydroelectric capacity. This caused runoff to go into the Columbia River and make a dead zone with lower oxygen levels and harmful chemicals where nothing can survive. The dead zone killed all the fish and marine life roaming through it. All these marine animals dying leaves a massive hole in the ecosystem which can affect your life. For 50 years, people living in Washington did not know any of this was happening, and it didn't just stop animal cruelty. Many people dependent on the fish suffered too. This leads to the next topic, culture. Washington has been a diverse and cultural state, accepting many ethnicities and cultures, but the Columbia Basin Project had ruled some of them out. As mentioned previously, the Columbia Basin Project created dead zones in the Columbia River. These dead zones took the lives of many fish. The tragedy hit the fish very hard, but the Native Americans and Washington fishermen also took a blow. The Native Americans had a tradition of fishing which they've been continuing for hundreds and hundreds of years, so it'd be hard to stop. All the fish migrating north died going through the dead zones, which caused a huge lack of fish, so it was very hard for the Native Americans to continue their traditions. So they moved out even though they've been living there their entire life. Washington fishermen also had the same effect. They didn't have supplementary fish to make a living and either moved out or committed suicide as they didn't have enough money to resettle. The Columbia Basin Project has had many positive impacts, but the culture of Washington could have been a lot more diverse and inclusive without the Columbia Basin Project.